Welcome to the Hour of Breakthrough. For those of you that if this is your first time joining us, the Hour of Breakthrough is actually a segment that I do monthly where I talk about mental health topics that affect our community. And sorry, I'm reading my husband's comments. I have it monthly, and I often have a guest, or I'm going to start having more guests. And tonight's guest I have is Shayla Bullock, and she actually has been working in the area of domestic violence for over 14 years, Shayla?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
I can't believe it's that long.
Right. so Shayla's a licensed professional counselor. Hi, cousin, Rudy. She's a licensed professional counselor. She's been doing it for a while. And tonight's topic is, hello. Tonight she's going to talk about, domestic violence and, just the cycle of abuse, the cycle of violence, and what exactly that means. There's been a lot of talk in the news lately, in the media lately, about abuse and sexual assault and just different things. And we thought it was important to pause and take time to really understand it and give you guys resources and information. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. I think the topic, I called it Understanding and Stopping the Cycle of Abuse. So with that being said, if there are no questions, hello everyone who has joined us, hello, welcome. I hope that you get some really good information. I'm sure that you will. We are going to get started. All right, well, thanks again, Shayla, for being here. Start with the first set of questions. So I think a lot of people, when you think of abuse, I think people oftentimes have like the idea of physical abuse in their minds.
Yes,
they think of like being beaten down and that kind of things. Yeah. But I was hoping maybe you could shed some light on what abuse is. Like, how would you define abuse, and what is abuse exactly?
Yeah, and it's funny you even said that, because that's like a big issue or barrier to people getting services, is because they think it's only one thing, and the media only portrays one thing. Most of the time you hear the worst cases. But really, who we work with the most are people that are emotionally abused and all these other tactics. So let me start with what abuse is. Abuse is usually a pattern of behavior. And it's a pattern of controlling behavior used to control the victim or the partner. So there's these power and control tactics that abusers use to gain power and control over their victim. And I have a little props with me. You might not be able to see them, but maybe perhaps look them up. They're all over the internet. You'll get a copy, but people don't know to look them up. So something we use a lot in my profession is the power and control wheel. So this is a more updated version, more colorful version, but just gives you but I'll use the old school type that we use. So basically, you have all different types or tactics that someone uses to keep someone under control. Oh, wow. So you have intimidation, which that could be anything from punching a hole in the wall. You also have emotional abuse, which more people know, calling names, but that could also involve manipulation, and that's a big part. You'll hear me mention that a lot. I do a lot of education around manipulation with my clients. That's a big factor. Isolation is another thing, where they isolate you from your family and your friends, because they want you to themselves, and we'll go over that a little bit when we go over like the profile of an abuser. They also minimize, deny, and blame their behavior. So they blame it on the abusive or the abused partner. They minimize it, like if it's if they choke you, like, oh no, I just put my hands around your neck, or it's they just minimize their behavior. They use children. Sometimes even pit the children against the other partner. And I say partner because a perpetrator or an abuser can be male or female, believe it or not. It's just there's a higher rate of males that abuse. But I also treat male victims as well. Economic abuse, money-wise, you could have an abuser who is the money maker and holds the money for himself, or you could have an abuser who doesn't make the money but controls the partner's money.
Wow.
So it could go either way. So you have different types of abusers, and we'll get to that. Coercion and threats. We've had abusers coerce their significant other to have babies. Reproductive coercion is what we call that. Threats. Dealing with the immigration stat. I have a lot of immigrants that I see, and their abusers use their immigration status, threaten to call ICE, things like that. But other threats can be anything like, I'll tell your boss this, or I'll post this. Now that we're in the social media craze, I'll post this video, and things like that. But it can be all sorts of kinds of threats. So these are things they use to keep their partner in control. Now the physical violence is usually a partner will resort to physical violence when these things are not working. So that's what's physical or sexual violence.
Okay.
So that's why physical or sexual violence are on the outside of the will.
Gotcha.
Because usually a partner will use those tactics if their usual tactics are not working. But mostly the tactics that they use are manipulation. Pretty good abusers are pretty good at that. At just manipulating things and making their partner feel crazy, which is gaslighting things. So yeah.
Why is there this need to control? Like, what is that about? Like, maybe that's a broad question. But
well, it's this flip flop, and this probably going to go a little into your other questions, but. People tend to believe that victims or survivors are the ones with the low self-esteem. But no, au contraire, mon frère. The abusive partners or the abusers are the ones that more so have the low self-esteem. So the wonderful, beautiful women that I work with are very strong women, have their stuff together, doing it for themselves, and then this partner comes in and kind of obliterates that. Takes all that away because they see their shine and they want to diminish that.
So
because
they're insecure.
Yes, insecure for sure. That's definitely one of the hallmarks of somebody who's abusive. So yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you, Shayla. Do we have any? Yeah. Oh, thank you, Rudy. Hi, April. Okay, great. So thank you for shedding some light. I think that was very, very informative and helpful. Yeah. The wheel that you just showed us, the power and control wheel, is that the same thing as the cycle of abuse? Is it sort of related?
No, it's different.
Okay.
It's, the cycle of abuse more so talks about how abuse kind of happens and really connects to why it's so difficult for someone to leave that type of relationship or tells how that cycle happens. So what happens with, and I do have a little prop.
I like this.
Of course. The cycle of abuse. But you'll see different versions of the cycle of abuse. This one gives a little bit more detail to what's going on. And actually one of our interns printed or did that one.
Cool.
To add some more stuff. So first I want to say before we get really into that, like the cycle of violence, first an abusive relationship and a healthy relationship happen the same way, begin the same way.
Wow.
So that's why there's a confusion when people see like, well, how did you get in a relationship with this guy? Because this guy wasn't like that in the beginning of the relationship. So guarantee if you went on your first date with someone and he came across the table and hit you or he cussed you out, called you names and everything like that, wouldn't be a second date. Right? Wouldn't be a second date. But that's not how it happens. Abusers are I tell my clients all the time, like I'm more raising my eyebrows to someone who's charming and a good talker. Because that's how abusers present themselves in the beginning. Wow. Very charming people, very nice. And I'll talk about this later when we talk about prevention and with kids and everything. The boogeyman doesn't look like the boogeyman, okay? So these guys are not presenting themselves as these evil people. Now, I'm not saying there aren't abusers that are like that. There are abusers that have a propensity for violence, and you'll see them getting into fights all the time, and that's also a red flag when you're in a relationship. If everything, they're antagonistic and everything's a fight or an issue or whatever and stuff. But mostly abusers are very charming. And very likable and likable to other people, and that's the confusion when, you know, the relationship is going on, confusion to the partner as well, because all these people say, oh, your husband is great, your boyfriend is great, he's this and he's that, but behind closed doors you see a completely different picture.
Person, yeah.
You get it because that's how he was with you in the beginning, but then something changes, you know. So we say every relationship starts with the honeymoon phase. So everyone's on their best behavior. Everything is all good. You're not doing too much in front of this guy. You know, you always have your makeup on. Everybody's always looking good and everything like that. And then there's something that triggers the partner, where you start to see, you know, some different behavior. So he basically goes off. There's an explosion. Could be some verbal violence, a verbal altercation, physical altercation. Usually physical abuse kind of escalates. So it starts with pushing and shoving. So immediately you do have some abusers that will start off with like punching or kicking or, you know, doing something extremely violent. But it's usually what we see is an escalation of behavior. So it might be a push or a shove during an argument. But keep in mind that any use of force in an argument is a red flag if that partner is using force. So you have the explosion happens, and then the excuse comes in. The abuser's very apologetic after an incident like that happens, especially if it's the first time. That will never happen again. I don't know what came over me. They explain it away, and it's very human for you to explain it away. Who wants to think that the person they chose to spend the rest of their life with or to have a relationship with is this person? You think to yourself, everyone makes mistakes. It's not, you know, okay, it's not, as long as he knows or she knows not to do it again, everything, you know, is okay. So we explain stuff away, which is very human, very, you know, normal and stuff. And then you go into this honeymoon phase where everything is great. He may do something that we call love bombing, which is tons of presents, roses, chocolates, candies, take you on, depending on his income, take you on an extravagant vacation, you know, do all these, you know, things.
Is love bombing?
Yes, love bombing. So doing this extreme, like, this is where you see like a room full of roses. You come to work there, your office is filled with roses and balloons or something like, or you come home and there's just this whole presentation of things or whatever. So just inundating you with love and everything like that. We also call that in my profession the recapture phase, the rehook phase, because that is how they're pulling you back into the relationship after, you know, they've known they've done something wrong. Well, they don't necessarily know they done something. They know it's wrong, but not to the extent we know it's wrong. It's just they've gotten, what you notice with abusers, and never take responsibility for, you know, anything. So it's always your fault. Well, if you didn't, even in the honeymoon phase, they'll be like, well, if you didn't say this or you didn't do that, if you cooked the food right, if you cleaned this right, if you picked up the kids on time, whatever it is, they'll insert that and be as sweet as can be about it and use that to recapture you, to pull you back into the relationship. And then what happens? Nothing is really resolved. You go back into your routine of the relationship, and then there's another trigger, and then that whole thing happens again. So that is the cycle of violence, you know, that you kind of get, caught up in. And stuff. So it goes, so when it gets to the point, I always like to tell people, like, gets to that twirling point where you know what's up from down, what's happening. And a lot of times the honeymoon phase can last for a significant amount of time. Everyone's situation is different. So you can have a honeymoon phase. I've known someone to have one of my clients to have a honeymoon phase for a year. So you can understand having a honeymoon phase for a year thinking, okay, that was an isolated incident. But it just so happens that just with this particular perpetrator or abuser, his pattern is different. And every abuser is going to have a different kind of cocktail. So, you know, of how they are and what their pattern is. And so when people talk about re-victimization and how people are in multiple abusive relationships, it's because every abuser doesn't look the same. You think, okay, well, this guy has a job, so he's not going to be draining me of all my funds, but this guy with a job has other controlling behaviors and other issues and, you know, stuff like that. So.
And a lot of victims blame themselves, right? It's like, well, how
Yes.
could I, because
Yes.
people who are in multiple abusive relationships,
Yes.
like, how could I get in this situation?
Yes, they feel like they have a sign on their head and things like that. But I always give the analogy of, if I'm, I don't know, say I'm in a parking lot, somewhere, and I see that somebody left their purse, on the seat or something. And, I walk by, I'm like, ooh, and I see doors unlocked. I'm like, they should have unlocked their door. But I'm walking by, probably trying to see if somebody's coming to the car, just left the car to see if they could come back. But, my cousin Day, he gonna take that purse. So he gonna take that purse. So there's opportunists. There's people that people got to keep in mind that, as charming as these guys are, they have learned to get what they want. They have learned to choose people and their vulnerabilities that make it easier for them to manipulate.
Shayla, I think we have a question.
Oh, sorry.
Where does the abuser's behavior come from?
Oh gosh, America. It's a lot of the times it's complex trauma or previous abuse. They've experienced that in their own lives. But you also have children who are abused who do not become abusers. You have children who are abused who become abusers, who become victims, and who do not become abusers. So everyone experiences things differently, but there's things that are reinforced in their environment, and that could be on the streets, it could be by their caregivers, just someone not exactly pulling them up on their manipulative behaviors. Because you think about it, as kids, we start with, kind of little manipulations we kind of try out, but some of us have parents that kind of check us, or a caregiver or somebody kind of check us on it. Like, that's not, no, you can't do that. You can't try to manipulate somebody to get some candy or, whatever it is. Usually, and not everybody has that. A lot of these behaviors are deeply ingrained beliefs. They have beliefs about who women are and who they are in relationships, or men in relationships. And it's very hard. This is why it's very hard for an abuser to change, because these beliefs are deeply, a belief is more hard ingrained than a thought.
Right.
So it's harder for that to kind of, although we do believe some people can change, but with a lot of hard work, and you have to see the appropriate signs going on, because some pretend that they're changing, and that's not really what's going on.
That's good. Yeah. That's good. So hopefully that answers your question. Good question, by the way. Keep the questions coming. Okay. So oftentimes, we were talking before the segment about victim blaming, right?
Yeah,
and how that really is just, right? But a lot of people wonder, why don't victims of domestic violence just leave? Like, how many times have we heard that? Like, why are they there?
Yeah. And where is that?
Yes,
yes,
agree with
yes,
April.
yes, April. It can be learned or adopted behavior. Yes, in their environment, just in their environment, they can learn. And like I say, it could be reinforced by their experiences in their relationships and stuff like that.
Right.
There's many ways that people become, just like there's many ways people become criminals. There's many ways people become abusive. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, April, for that statement.
So
why don't they just leave, Shayla?
Oh gosh. So what our answer to that usually is, and this is actually something I do presentations on as much as I can or want to, one of my favorite presentations to do, about the survivor's decision-making process. But first I want to say to, produce another question, like why can't these men and women stop hitting their partner? Why can't they stop abusing them? And that's where we kind of want to change or shift the question off of the victim and onto the abuser, or the one that's responsible for the behavior. So first that. But it is a good question, because people don't understand basically what a survivor goes through every day. So every day a survivor kind of wakes up and goes through their own risk analysis. So they have life-generated risk, abuser-generated risk, and just risk based on who they are as a person. So those life-generated risks are things like poverty, or the threat of poverty, where their next meal is coming from, where they're going to get income. If they have kids, how are they going to house the kids and themselves if they leave this person? There's all these questions that go through their head. And that notion that people say, oh, they must like it is crazy. No, but they feel trapped and they don't know how to get out of it. So there's also the abuser-generated risk. They don't know what's going on. Just as soon as they wake up, you have some abusers that abuse you in the middle of the night, early in the morning. Something has ticked them off in the morning, and they're on top of you, beating you. Are you going to be sexually assaulted that morning? Are you going to have to do certain things that kind of de-escalate his behavior? What is going to be done to me abusively? Is he going to, psychologically abuse me all day, berate me all day, things like that. So they're going through that list in their head. They're also going through, okay, if I get out, how can I get out? The court system is sometimes not fair. so the last time I got a protective order, they denied it because I didn't have enough evidence. So is that going to happen? Or I'm scared to get a protective order. I feel like that's going to set them off even more. And then there's who she is. Is she an immigrant? And he's threatening her status. She's married to an American. So is he going to keep her from getting her, credentials and all this other stuff? Is he going to report her to ICE? Do I have a disability? And do I need him for that disability? Can I get down the steps by myself? We're talking about, these are a lot of women that have vulnerabilities. The kids are a vulnerability. How do I get them out of the house, unscathed? And we also have to remember the most important thing, the most dangerous time. And I'm sorry if I'm talking too fast, but the most dangerous time for a victim or survivor is when they leave. So you have to understand that people remember cases, I don't remember the name, but of the woman in Prince George's County at High Point High School, was gunned down by her abuser. She had a protective order. She was doing everything. She was just waiting for her kids to get out of soccer practice from high school. And she was still gunned down. So we have to keep stuff like that in mind too when we ask that question, because it's when they leave, it's the most dangerous. And I tell my clients all the time, when we're in there, we're not telling them to leave their relationship today. There needs to be a plan of how that goes, where the kids are going to go, where you're keeping your important documents, how to slowly it's a process. I have some clients that have to slowly get their stuff out of the home and then make a move to get out. And sometimes it could be a long process, but it does happen. But it cannot be, I never tell clients, and I suggest to other people, not encourage clients to go home and tell their partner, I'm going to leave today, because that is quickly going to escalate. Because if you're dealing with a person who's about power and control, and then they lose that power and control, they go off their rockers. A lot of abusers where fatalities happen, they're not planned. So it's not necessarily planned all the time. Not to say that they sometimes are, but a lot of times they're not planned. They're trying to get their attention, they're trying to do whatever, but then a fatality occurs because you're dealing with someone who doesn't believe they're responsible for their own behavior. And to me, that's the most dangerous thing to deal with, for sure.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I don't think I realized how involved that could be. Like, as you lay it out, just how
it's
involved this risk analysis that victims go through. They're really weighing these options, weighing
every
these
day.
things out.
And you got to keep in mind they're surviving. They're surviving those days. They're not enjoying it. They're surviving it. So if it looks like they're happy sometimes, they look like things are going, that is how they're surviving the situation. It takes up to 7 times to leave. That's a statistic.
Wow.
So, and there could have been times that they left and you don't even know about it. And they went back and, something's happened because he made promises, he'll get help and things will happen. And, but, if you have somebody that's not taking responsibility for their behavior, they might say, I'm sorry, but then there's a but in there. And that's not taking responsibility. I'm sorry, but if you didn't do this or you didn't do that, that's not taking full responsibility. So it's important for survivors to know that, what responsibility really looks like. And you can really, just for people to glance, I brought props. But this is like the Bible domestic violence or behavior, abusive behavior. So in this book, it kind of tells you what to look for. It has a lot of information, but it's by Lundy Bancroft. Why does he do that?
Okay.
And it basically tells you what to look for if someone is truly changing. So if you want a checklist, if your partner is in abuser intervention, it's not anger management. He needs to be in abuser intervention. Those are two different things. That's one thing. And you just want to look at that checklist to see if he's really changing or if he's just saying that because it's Valentine's Day is coming up.
Right.
So,
that's good.
yeah.
That's good. All right, Shayla, you're a wealth of information, and I'm just so glad that people are tuned in and getting this information. So the other question is there a profile for an abuser? And you might have touched on this. I mean, we talked about the insecurity of these individuals. But I would ask, is there a profile for an abuser, and is there a profile for a victim?
Yeah. Now, as far as the abuser, yes, there's a general profile, but like I said, everyone has a little cocktail, of something. And there's a lot of, you can also look up red flags of abusive behavior or abusive mentality, signs of an abusive mentality, and that will give you a more comprehensive list. But and I could also send you that if that's something you're looking for. But one of the number one things, they're charming. So I mentioned that before. They're also very, they're going to say things in the beginning of the relationship, say things to you someone's never said to you before, do things for you no one's done for you before, and I'll talk later about this grooming process that happens with abusers that's much like pedophiles. So the same process happens with abusers. But they're controlling, have a sense of entitlement, for sure. Unrealistic expectations about the relationship, like you need to be perfect all the time. If you feel like you're running circles around your partner trying to make things right and nothing seems to satisfy them, that's a red flag. There's no accountability for behavior. Abusers they try to avoid consequences. And so that means not taking responsibility for their behaviors. So that's where we get the minimizing, denying, and blaming from. So they blame their partners and everybody else. And this is just and this is pervasive. So this is in every part, of their life. So not just at home, but at work too. They might come home and blame everybody else for something that's gone wrong. So it's everyone else that's causing an issue. They don't take that responsibility. Yes, the low self-esteem. They lack empathy. So even if you say, hey, this is unfair, this is not right, or, call them on their manipulation, that goes over their head because they lack that empathy to have for that, Or if or it seems like they're showing empathy, it might be part of the manipulation, quite possibly. And then, as I said before, they're antagonistic. Everything is an issue, a debate. This might push your friends and family away. Some people might notice that, like they don't want to talk to him, be around him, things like that, because he's, just a nice person. Or it could be the opposite. He's very charming. He's the life of the party. Everyone wants to be around him. So you're dealing with it. That's why I say everyone has a different kind of cocktail. But then the thing is, they're different with you. So noticing those, changes and things like that. And they present as a victim. That's the most important part. So they present themselves as a victim to other people. So they're the ones that have been wronged, and there's something that we train under in my profession of identifying the primary aggressor. And how you identify that is they play the victim. You're not going to have a survivor necessarily play, a victim. They're blaming themselves for things. They're, doing all of that. So, but you will have a perpetrator that will do that, or someone who's abusive that will say, woe is me, because they're, they have also this narcissistic, behavior tendencies where it's like it's all about them. So,
I immediately started thinking about personality disorders as you were talking. And that made me think about, like, how do you intervene with this population? Like, how do you help them change their way of thinking and, like, I mean, for folks who are legit don't have that empathy. Or
Yeah.
Insight.
It's hard. I mean, I myself, my later work is not with, I found my passion in working with survivors. But when I was an intern, I worked with perpetrators or abusers. It's difficult work, but I feel like I definitely have a lot of coworkers that are great at doing it, at challenging those beliefs and challenging those perceptions. And, there's a curriculum involved, very thought out curriculums that people are very passionate about, of changing those behaviors. And what we found to happen, even if an abuser does change, is usually they're not making those changes in the relationship that got them into that, those courses, but maybe a new relationship, because, those old patterns kind of exist and they kind of need a fresh start to kind of try out those new patterns and stuff. But it's a lot of hard work, and everyone's not willing to do that hard work, and they have to believe they have a problem. So if they're still minimizing, denying, and blaming their behavior on other people, they're not willing to get that help. So yeah, you have to deal with that, but it's hard work for sure.
Thank you, Shayla. And what about the victim? Are there people that are sort of more, more susceptible?
Yeah. I like that word, yeah.
Okay.
And you have susceptibility because, and I think it's important to mention, too, that victims and abusers, all kinds of races, gender identification, socioeconomic status, all different backgrounds. So there's not one intelligence. A lot of people think intelligence has something to do with, people in these relationships. It has nothing to do with intelligence. You can have a bazillion IQ and still be in one of these relationships. And I like to say, because it probably deals with matters of the heart in a sense too, and that everyone is not educated. You could be educated on all kinds of things, but not on manipulation, not on abuse. And I find that a lot of people, and we'll probably get back to that later, are not educated on those things. So victims are usually, like I said, they're not necessarily have low self-esteem. These are women who are, and some of them can, be single parents, be in a relationship. That's another thing. All types of relationships. Very strong women, be stay-at-home moms, have jobs, do both, whatever it is. Very generous and very kind. When I talk about my clients, I could say that after 14 years, I deal with some very generous, loving, kind, miraculous women. So if I'm talking about a profile, that's what I'm seeing. But what the issue that comes with that is when you're dealing with givers, caretakers, people that are very generous and kind, you have takers that will suck and drain you like a vampire. And takers find the givers. So you're dealing with people that will take the shirt off their back, and you're dealing with people that are finding them and taking advantage of those qualities. So I tell my clients all the time, you have great qualities. It's just that you're not aware that people are taking advantage of those things and exploiting them for their own needs and wants, kind of thing. But there's also issues with, victims who have a hard time asserting themselves, hard time people pleasers, hard time saying no, things like that, because abusers don't care about boundaries. They, encroach, run over those, boundaries all the time. And when you're dealing with someone who's hard to, sustain their boundaries, then you're dealing with a perfect storm of an issue, So it's usually they're not aware of manipulative behavior, but I find that a lot of people aren't aware of manipulative behavior. So that is a whole new education within itself, and they're not aware of abusive behavior. What is a healthy relationship? What is unhealthy? With both the abusers and the perpetrators, when they live in abusive environments, they do not know they're abusive. That is considered normal, typical behavior in a relationship. So when these relationships happen, they have already learned as a kid to survive those patterns. They have learned to survive those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, it's easy, or I wouldn't say easy, but like familiar.
Sure.
To them. And then you deal with people that have no clue of what an abusive relationship looks like or unhealthiness looks like. Had a great model as, parents or caregivers of what that looked like. But that also puts them in a place where they don't know that there's people out there that are bad and that are going to take advantage of them.
Right.
So you're dealing with both of those things. And I always say an abusive relationship is a perfect storm of two abused people coming together, or one abused person and one not abused, or two people that just don't know what a healthy relationship is. So don't know what their relationship rights are and things like that. And
So that's what I was going to ask you. In terms of working with the victims, the actual survivors of abuse, are you doing some of that work of education?
Oh yeah, and this is probably why I have a Mariana page. Because I do believe that after doing this for several years, I do believe education is the number one thing that's needed out there, for sure. People just are not aware of many of those things, and then when they become aware, of course, the guilt and shame comes in. But that's that hindsight bias. They're judging themselves years ago on information they didn't have.
Right.
So
Right.
So
that's
you're
good.
dealing, with that issue as well. So yeah. So
I definitely, I've witnessed that, people sort of blaming themselves, and it's like, well, when you were such and such age,
you
didn't know.
You didn't know. So a lot of education topics that come up. Of course, you have healthy and unhealthy relationships, but we're also talking about codependency, which the abusers have a lot of issues with, or both sides of the fence do, and manipulation. So you're dealing with all that stuff, and those are some of the highlighted topics we talk about. But it's like, boundaries, a lot of stuff. That's a big thing, because people don't know what that is. Like, what do you do? How do I set boundaries? And don't realize that they have a hard time setting boundaries, or being assertive. Or being assertive, or whatever. And not all victims are passive. You have some that are aggressive or passive aggressive, or just don't know how to. I think a majority of people don't know how to be assertive. They mix aggressiveness with assertiveness. Assertiveness is not yelling and screaming and cussing somebody out. That's not being assertive. That's a more aggressive behavior. Assertiveness is directness and clear, communication. So, and I think communication is also a topic as well. So, our healthy communication. Yeah,
it's good stuff. Okay, so what can I do as a layperson? So the viewers actually may want to know, as folks who are not in mental health, but may have friends, if they suspect a friend or someone they know is in a domestic violence situation or an abusive relationship in general, what can they do?
Oh, wow. So it's a big, topic. I think the most important thing is to believe them. Believe them, and not, question, a lot of their stuff where they feel like they're on the witness stand and you're grilling them. It's like, well, what did he do? And how did he do it? And what's it?
Right.
And, or to not victim blame, because that doesn't help. And victim blaming is kind of saying, well, what did you do?
Right.
Well, what did you do? I know that some of that sickness is in this world right now, where we look at a picture, and I'm going way back to Rihanna. We look at Rihanna's picture, and we say, well, what did she do?
Right.
Now, I think there's a lot of compassion lacking when, we could do that as a society, as a nation, or whatever, and look at that picture and wonder that. I think the big key is compassion. Honesty without compassion equals brutality. So if you're going to be honest, and I can't take the credit of that quote, that's from anger management, so don't be like, Shayla.
Say it again. That was good. Say it again.
Honesty without compassion equals brutality. One of my favorite quotes, because you have friends and family out there, it's like, I'm just keeping it real. I'm just keeping it real with them. They need some tough love. They need to be said this and that and all that other stuff. And guess what? It's going to go right through the ear, out the other. Like, they're not going to respond to that. Would you respond to that? Not, people need compassion. They need, look at it like, I'm sorry this happened to you.
Right.
So these are some quotes that go well with this. Just, I'm sorry this has happened to you. Because I know a lot of times we feel like we got to give a dissertation to people. But some people just need someone to listen and say, I'm sorry this has happened to you. No one deserves to be abused. This is in no way, in shape, or form their fault. This is 100% the responsibility of the abuser. Now, a lot of people, I already know, people are going to be like, you sure? Even the victims and survivors have a hard time, with that statement. But this is what we have to teach our kids. You're responsible for your behavior. I don't care if you feel like you were provoked or, something happened. In the end, if somebody spits in you in a ball game and, you attack, them back, I don't know, hit them with a baseball bat, guess who's going to jail? Right. So, you got to be aware of those consequences of, that behavior. And to let them know that there's help. There is, help out there. Even if they are not getting physically abused. That is not the only form of abuse. That is actually the last resort that abusers use. So to emphasize that this is manipulation, emotional abuse, if they feel trapped, if they feel unsafe in any kind of way. And safety has to do not just with physical safety, emotional safety. Can I say anything to my partner? Can I have a disagreement with my partner and not feel like I want to retreat under a shell, or I can't truly be authentic with my partner? Like, these are healthy things. And if you can't do that, then, it's possibly unhealthy. And everyone's relationship is on a spectrum, including my own. But we just want to lean more towards the healthier side of that spectrum, and definitely far away from the abusive. So you want some kind of balance of behavior. And it's okay, to leave. It's okay to make a plan. It's okay to have your own decisions. What you don't want to do with a family member or friend is become as controlling as the abuser. In other words, you go to therapy. I've definitely had family members bring victims to my office, and the victim had no say in the matter or was very much coerced. And I have a conversation with the family members, and I have a conversation with the victim. Because I want that victim, when they are in trouble or when they're in that instance where they're ready to come and get help, to come and get help. And sometimes the family members are so, and it's, it's from a source of fear. So it's very much understandable. I understand it. It's very fearful when somebody you love and care about is in a situation and you're not sure what's going to happen to them day to day. So some of us get very passionate about pulling them out of that, situation and stuff. And then we're talking about adults here, so we're not necessarily talking about, teenagers and children yet. So that's a whole different animal. But some of those same things need to be used in adolescence as well. And so I have a lot of adolescents getting into unhealthy relationships and stuff like that. So
Okay. So this one is just to sort of kind of incorporate what's been going on in our world today. So by now, most of America has seen the Surviving R. Kelly documentary. And if you haven't, it's definitely, I think, worth the watch and a discussion. There were quite a few things that were disturbing about the documentary for me, but perhaps one of the most disturbing things was the fact that so many young girls fell prey to R. Kelly. What tips, Shayla, do you have for parents raising this next generation of young women and young men, for that matter, to better equip them when confronting, the lure of someone like R. Kelly? You talked about the grooming phase and all of that.
Yes.
So how do we protect our kids?
Well, I think the first thing I always tell, and I say this to my adult clients as well, but I think it's very important for children to know, and I have kids myself, to know that the boogeyman doesn't look like the boogeyman. That you have nice people in this world that pretend to be nice to get things from you or to get what they want. But of course, that needs to be communicated on the level of which the child is on. So I tell people all the time, with my kids, I have school-age children. So if they come home from school, they're talking, first of all, get to know what your child's day, who their friends are. I'm very nosy, probably because I'm a therapist, I don't know. But I ask probing questions. And my child is very vocal. One of them is very vocal. So I ask questions about his interactions during the day. And I point out, and this could be because my mind is kind of prone to manipulative tactics and things like that. And it's like, how did he try to get your pencil? Okay. How did he? Okay, he didn't give it back. And what was going on with that? Did he give it back? You're just teaching them about in their everyday interactions on things to pick up on. Teaching them about healthy boundaries and about consent. Consent is a major thing I don't think people think about with younger kids. But you could use it. I always use this example with my clients, with their kids, and what I use with my kids. So I don't force my kids to hug relatives. And I know this is shocking. Hug or, I don't force them to do anything physical with a relative. I give them choices. So when we greet people, I say, you want to say hi? Do you want to give them a hug? So this is intertwining consent and choices all in there. Because you want them to, I always give the example because my son, there was a relative of his that looked different. She had, was sick, so she looked different than what she usually looks like. So I'm like, hey, you want to give her a hug? He was like, heck no. No, I don't. And I was like, okay, so do you want to wave that? You want to give a high five? And, he was okay with that. And so I was like, good. And then by the end of dinner, he was okay with giving her a hug because he realized who it was at that point. And he was like, oh, okay, this is so-and-so. So I'm cool with that. But I want them to get in touch with their gut instinct. What's going on inside of them, because that's the biggest muscle that they're going to have against perpetrators, because we feel things first. Our gut instinct tells us who people are initially. We just tend to ignore it because sometimes, and not to mean that parents don't mean well, or back in the day parents didn't mean well, to to be like, oh, give him a hug, because we'll be hiding behind like, I don't know this person. They're like, give him a hug, go ahead. But we don't know also that we're teaching our kids to go off our stuff or the parents' intuition versus their own. And they need to strengthen the muscle of their own intuition. So
that's good. Shayla.
And they need to know that they have choices. So it could be it could be in a respectful manner. I tell people that all the time. I'm not telling my kids to say no, okay, like whatever.
Right.
And be like, how can we greet? We can still greet someone in different ways that are comfortable for us.
Right.
As adults, we're not going to go around and hug everyone. And it's also a red flag if you have a child who does go around and hug everyone, but that's the sense they have. Yes, they could be a happy-go-lucky kid, but it also can be a sense that maybe their boundaries need to be, or they don't have that gift of discernment like some kids may have. So we want to teach them, like, okay, do you know who this is? Okay, and what do you like about them? Or just to see why are they so happy, hugging other people or whatever. To ask more questions.
Wow.
And that also the power well. So if teaching them a vulnerable position does not equal consent. So if someone, and this leads up to adolescent years. So if someone is, someone has a disability at school and they're trying to make them do things because they know they don't understand, that person doesn't understand what's going on. That is, and they're consent, and they feel like they're consenting to the behavior, but they don't know what's going on. That leads to, having an intoxicated friend who doesn't know what's going on, and you're asking them to perform sexual acts or sexual intercourse.
Wow.
So, it's that same, type, connection with consent and all that other stuff. So you want, that I'm trying to teach them. I think I said teach about manipulation, and learn to recognize when someone's attempting to ignore their boundaries. So I always talk to my kids and say, well, if you answered a question once and you said no, that's it. A no is a no. And especially when we're dealing with females, no tends to be maybe to some people.
Yeah,
or they think
true.
it's maybe instead of no. So you deal with also a gender issue as well. Little girls are taught to be polite and nice, and little boys are taught to be aggressive and, direct, or, whatever it is. So being kind of aware of that, and so that your child knows that their no means no.
Yeah.
Period. Even with yourself, like if you're tickling your kid and they're like, no, stop.
Yeah.
Like they said stop, that is respecting their boundary.
Yeah.
If you're talking to someone or they're asking you something, you say no and they continue to ask you, that is their attempt to control you. If they that is their attempt, or they're not respecting your boundaries. So that is your red flag. That okay. So if a guy is calling you 50 times and you told him you went to bed at 9 o'clock, he doesn't care about your boundaries.
That's good.
So, and a female as well. So, so it's those things that I think are important to teach kids that we don't really think about. And the only reason why I'm aware of it, because I've been probably educated on it for so long, where I'm like, I really want my kids to know this.
Yeah.
I really want, and because I see it lacking in some of my clients where they just don't trust their instinct. And that's the most important thing you can rely on. People show you who they are. It's just, we don't believe it.
Yeah.
So, and we explain things away. And we need to be able to trust and be like, no, I trust. And usually that's sometimes what the victim is going back. Like, yeah, like once they get to education, be like, yep, I saw this. I saw this. But sometimes we're under that love cloud. That love cloud is strong. So we don't always see anything. Yeah.
Okay.
Is that a question?
I think it's a statement from April.
Okay.
Okay, April, strong parental relationships with open communication is important, as the child should be able to share with the parents those situations that feel off.
Yes, for sure.
Good comment, April.
To make sure you're like an open book, like they know that you're not going to freak. So that means when they come to you with information that freaks you out, act like you're not freaked out.
Oh, that can be so hard, though.
It's hard. But you kind of have to act, because once they see, they're like, okay, I can't go with mommy with that anymore. Yeah. So making sure you're an open book and that you're asking questions as opposed to judging them.
Right.
And saying, well, what you do that for? What's wrong with you? And it needs to be more, with trauma, it's more of a question, what has happened to you? What has happened to you? Yes, all these behaviors are going on, and to some parents, especially you're dealing with adolescents, you're like, this child getting on my nerves. But the question you want to ask instead of what's wrong with you is what has happened to you? Because something in fact might have happened to this child, and this is why these behaviors, new behaviors might be coming out, or something might be going on. Wow. So I think also a lot of parents are just not aware of, what that perpetrators can be nice and, or present as two different people. So that education is important.
That's good. Wow, Shayla, you have provided such great information, girl. I'm up here taking mental notes. I was like, I'm going to do this tonight with my kids. So thank you so much. Invaluable resource. And so I will certainly be reaching out to you regarding this sort of topic. If you all have any additional questions, we have about 2 or 3 more minutes. Please feel free to, ask a question on the Facebook Live. I might have to get a little close because I'm nearsighted.
I know, me too. Yeah. I need my readers. You know that.
Please feel free. There were some great questions tonight, great statements.
Yeah, if you need any, like I said, if you need information about red flags of abusive behavior, if you need information of the language of consent, I have a handout of for each age of what that sounds like or looks like.
Do you want to provide them with your email again, Shayla?
Yes. Okay. So it's Shayla Bullock, lcpc@gmail.com. So that's SHAYLA, B as in boy, ULLOCK, LC as in cat, P as in Paul, MC as in cat at gmail.com.
Right. So if you have any questions about the handouts that she's talking about, any resources, you can reach directly out to her.
Yeah.
Shayla, do you also have any
yeah.
websites that they can, sort of go to?
I did want to give out like the national hotline that we have out in the Maryland, specific Maryland, broader resources anyway, because there's a laundry list of resources out there, but I want to give people the broad spectrum just in case you're in different counties or anything like that. So the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. Again, that's 1-800-799-7233. And there's also the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence. So they have a wealth of resources for the state of Maryland under each county as far as where you get help. So I suggest calling them or going to their website, which is www.mnadv.org, and finding your county and seeing what resources are there. But their 1-800 number is 1-800-634-3577. And again, this is for MNADV. 1-800-634-3577. And then you have MCASA, which is the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault. Wonderful organization. They even have a portion of their organization dedicated to women of color and little black girls specifically. So 1-800-983-7273. And their website is www.mcasa, so mcasa.org. So you get a lot of information. I also want to mention, if people are faith-based, and MNADV has great information on for faith-based leaders. If you're a faith-based leader and you want to give resources to, or you want information or anything like that for your congregation or followers, you can certainly go on their website, and I just saw like a lot of information for that as well. So I know in our community, that's a big deal. So yeah. So if you want anything about healthy, unhealthy relationships,
yes, that's good. What's the link for that?
No, these are handouts.
Oh,
so.
okay.
But that information is also found on the MNADV website. All the things that I've been talking about today, a lot of that is could be found on their website or websites, around in different counties, different organizations that have that. I also have a handout for what family members can do and friends can do, what to say. So it's a lot more detailed. What else? If you're dealing with partner contacts with an abusive partner, I always also have information on how do you navigate those partner contacts, or how do you help your child deal with an abusive parent. How you keep your child out of the middle of all that. So just quick handouts or informational handouts that help with that. So, but also encourage a lot of people, like if you're in a relationship like this or feel like you are, like to get counseling. I know that's taboo in our community, but it's very, much needed, and it's great to get an unbiased ear, especially if you're not getting the support you need from your family and friends.
Yeah.
Like, it's great to, get that ear of somebody that knows what you're talking about and can validate your feelings with all of that. And not to there is an issue with there might be some therapists that don't have the education of domestic violence, so it might be harder, so you might get some little, push-pull with it or whatever, but you could very well use a domestic violence resource, remain with your therapist, but maybe go to a support group for domestic violence or something like that. Always also have a listing of that for the Maryland area.
Oh, good.
So if you want that information, you could just email me, and I'll be happy to pass that along. So
okay, great.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Shayla. Thank you all for watching. I don't know if there are any last minute questions. I saw we have a new person that joined us. Hi. But if there are no questions, we're going to sign off. And this video actually will be posted to my my page, so you all can get the information, including Shayla's email address. You can replay it to get the information that you need. Okay, so I hope this was helpful. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate
Thanks,
Shayla.
everyone.
And we will see you next month for the Hour of Breakthrough. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, thank you, April. All right, bye-bye. Bye, Rudy. Bye, Gigi. Bye, Lorraine. Bye.